Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Planning Pulse. We've done a role reversal here because Sam normally introduces, and this is me, Stacey. Hi.
Hi everyone, I am here.
Really just thrown me, just decided to say that I'm introducing, but welcome. We'll start off by saying we're sorry, we're late, aren't we? We're a week late from publishing the latest episode.
Oh yeah, it might be more than that. I think we might have done one a month ago now. There was meant to be one 2 weeks ago, which sorry, we missed it. Things came up.
It's busy and there's stuff going on. And we can talk to you about that. Going to talk to you about what's been going on in a second. And we've decided to just very quickly own up as well and give an early apology if the audio is slightly different, because Sam and I and others that do the podcast usually record them in person, and we're not in person today. We're recording online over the information superhighway
on Teams, everyone's favourite corporate video in platform.
But there you go. So anyway, let's get into it. We would like to, we're going to chat to you about a few bits and bobs. We're going to update you on some member training that we did this week with our elected members. I'm going to chat to you all very quickly about some exciting stuff that's coming up next week for myself. I'm doing some stuff with the Planning Inspectorate, and hopefully that would, I think that would be of interest to you all. And then we're going to update you on some planning policy stuff or guidance that Sam and others have been leading on, which is quite interesting and different, and that is in relation to health impact. So should we kick that one off first, Sam?
Yeah, sure. So for a couple of years now, all the district and borough councils or planning authorities have been working with the public health team at the county council, who kind of took the bull by the horns, as it were, in relation to wanting to make sure that health considerations were more prominent when it came to, in this instance, specifically planning decision making. But I think the planning team, the public health team, at the county council have a broader remit than that, and their whole department exists to improve public health across the county. But yeah, they instigated this need to introduce health considerations more prominently within the planning world. And so we've been kind of workshopping really all that time with them. They've held training events. We've had sessions with others who are experts in this field, talking about other local authorities and other councils that have done stuff relating to health and health impact assessments, as well as then trying to create our own version of that for our county. And I suppose we've reached a bit of a milestone in so much as after all of that, we've got a new document that's been agreed or in the process of being agreed between all of the different authorities.
It's not yet, is it?
No, not yet. Although some other authorities have got to that stage yet, but we're just finalising our bit now with the county council. But essentially, it's a document that explains how the public health team at county will engage with us as a district planning authority on planning and local planning, and the kind of processes and procedures that we will adopt in order to make that work. It's all been done.
I was just going to say that's not. We should explain. It's not kind of coming in on Monday, is it? Or kind of that soon, because some listeners might be expecting that they're going to have to jump in a different direction if they're promoting development or they're going to make a planning application. So, what's the sort of timescales?
So the document's quite comprehensive in terms of covering that and the different stages that we're going to be going through over the next few years. So when we agree it, the most immediate thing that will happen is that we will start consulting the public health team formally on relatively large planning applications. So anything that's over 150 units would be the threshold for the Wealden area. There are different thresholds for the other authorities, but that reflects the nature and scale of the different types of development that we all get in our areas. The public health team are also then interested in more kind of obvious development that's related to health implications. So things like fast food takeaways, betting shops, those kind of things that have different implications because of the nature and type of their uses. So they'll also be interested immediately being consulted on those things. I mean, those not too familiar, we don't actually have a policy directly related to kind of health considerations, but it's clearly fundamental to planning. I mean, you could say it's one of the main reasons why the planning system exists in the first place. But equally, it is actually something that is referenced within the National Planning Policy Framework. There's a requirement in the NPPF to make sure that development creates kind of healthy, inclusive and safe spaces. So that's the hook for the kind of public health team. But then it's also how we should be assessing and considering and then deciding the applications and the plans that we produce as well. So that's all there. But yeah, in terms of this, where we've got to with the public health team, we'll adopt this document and then there'll be this stage that for the time being they would be involved providing comments about health related impacts from the development proposals that they get consultations on. The next most significant thing though will only come when we have adopted a new local plan. Right. On the basis that local plan will include a specific or a number of specific policies that relate that relate to health considerations. That will then trigger more formally a requirement for some developments to be accompanied or at least be screened for something called a health impact assessment. Now, health impact assessment kind of does what it says on the tin. It's very similar in the way that a local authority might deal with an environmental impact assessment, so an EIA. However, that's a very broad tool that relates to large-scale development and its wide or potentially wide significant impacts on the local environment. Whereas the health impact assessment tool kind of follows something similar in so much as you assess a development against a range of objectives or considerations in order to try and understand what the impacts of that development are. And if it has benefits, then great, make sure that we keep those and secure those. But where carrying out that impact assessment identifies that there could be some deficiency in a scheme or some problems or it's causing harm in some way, that you don't just necessarily acknowledge that and then kind of leave it, that maybe there's an opportunity there for either the developer or by the time the application comes to us, the council kind of have those discussions and look to mitigate those effects and make a scheme better in terms of its health outcomes. And I don't think it's necessarily radical, and I don't mean that to diminish the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years with the public health team in terms of getting this produced. Like I said, health and health considerations are quite fundamental to planning. But I think it's probably fair to say that assessing an application specifically in relation to its health impacts probably isn't done in the way that it will likely now be done in the future. And it does create a real opportunity, a different approach, and it does create a real opportunity to make sure that you take a step back to see, is the development doing the best that it can to, I don't know, do a range of things. It's going to cover stuff like active travel and green space and how people how people use space, and is it creating that kind of healthy environment that ensures that people do have those health benefits and those well-being benefits. So it'd be an interesting tool when it's introduced.
And I think actually I was going to say it will work, which is a bit clunky, but the new plan, and listeners, whether you're a member or a member of the public, you will have seen the consultation version of the new plan, and the criteria in some of the policies definitely talks to these issues. So there's a real overlap. So the health impact assessment at that stage, we will be doing it anyway via the different suite of policies. So I think it's different, it's change, and we will all need to adapt to that requirement. But for the time being, it won't be coming in. It's not going to be kind of, it won't bite next week or whatever, but it's definitely coming down the track, and probably a positive move. But we can do some more work with developers and certainly members and parish and town councils nearer the time to unpack that, so that the whole process is transparent, and people know what they need to do and what they need to what they can expect from development proposals. So that's
indeed. Yeah, and I think you might actually notice a little bit of a change just gradually over time anyway, because the whole purpose of this engagement and process tool and document that I've just referred to is that in this, we haven't yet adopted a policy stage. We are still going to do consultations, like I said, on larger schemes, but we also have committed to making sure that we reference health matters when we're having pre-apps, and that if we're considering EIA, especially at the screening stage, that we're more actively looking at that. I mean, EIA does have a section where you're meant to look at health impacts on development and, judge whether or not you think there'll be significant effects or not. So it's not reinventing the wheel in that sense. But nonetheless, like I said, we have committed to making sure that we discuss these things or flag these things with anybody that's, submitting applications for new development, and pointing them either to maybe doing health impact assessments earlier than they need to, just because of the benefit that it might have in making their schemes better, but also signposting them to the public health team who might be able to help and support them with that too. So, yeah, whilst it won't be an official formal thing until such time we've adopted a policy, with consulting the team in the interim on planning applications that are larger, and then also mentioning it where we can, it may be something that kind of begins to creep in and becomes part of normal planning life. Anyway.
Normal planning life. What's that? All right. Okay. That's good. So the next thing we were going to chat about, although I don't know how much detail we go into. I mean, there's some stuff that's already out there, isn't there? I've put some stuff online about the member training, which we've had this week. Perhaps if I sort of introduce it, Sam, then you can sort of explain it from your side.
Yeah.
It's no secret that we did something different this time. So we normally train our members, and that is the annual mandatory training. There's bite-sized training that happens more regularly, but mandatory training is usually topic-based, isn't it? It's usually kind of nuts and bolts of a proposal. How do you assess the impact on a tree, or enforcement, legal updates, all that sort of stuff, which is very important. This year we decided to do a different session, and it was targeted at behaviours and approaches and the culture of decision making, which was in part acknowledging that it isn't easy, and we said that, didn't we, to the members? This is all members and members of the committee. The role of a member is a tough one, and I think actually a couple of members said this, and I'm not quoting them, but it's a neat précis, which is that in planning you are always upsetting somebody, and that's true, isn't it? Because if you approve an application and there's representations against it, then you're upsetting the people that have given those comments. Mm-hmm. Equally, if you refuse an application because you feel that that's the way that it goes, and that the kind of adverse impact is not something you can support, then you're upsetting the applicant and anybody that's put in comments in favour. So it really is, and genuinely is, a no-win situation. It's quite rare that there are no comments on a planning application. Even the kind of smallest householders are now generating lots of comments. So, yeah, kind of leaning into that space with members to acknowledge that it's really difficult. And it was about some of the tools that members can use in order to deal with difficult decision making. So that was the sort of premise, wasn't it? And we did a handful of scenarios. Do you want to run through the scenarios?
Yeah. Although what I'll also add, I suppose, is that that was the premise, but we weren't shying away from the fact that there are consequences to an approach to how development is considered and how we take decisions that we just wanted to raise and challenge, I suppose, with the audience that we had, just to make sure that everybody kind of understood, where we were coming from, and that there was a discussion around that. And it was about a discussion around how those things can be difficult, but equally, how can we make those things better or easier to deal with if possible? That's what we did.
That's a good way of putting it. But it was very much a thinking piece, wasn't it? Rather than I don't want it to come across as that we're just strong-arming members to do the decision that officers want, because some people might think that, and that was absolutely not the case. It's not the intention. It was about recognising, as you say, the consequences of poor decision making, not just in terms of, I don't know, appeals and awards of costs in appeal scenarios, but poor decision making that doesn't properly cover all of the relevant issues that are important to people, for example. And
Yeah.
I don't want to trample into the bit around the scenarios, but that whole transparency of decision making and ensuring that all of the relevant factors have been aired and thoroughly. So you've got a robust decision at the end of it, for example, was just one of the points, wasn't it? But the scenarios I thought were really good. It felt realistic in the room, if that's the right way to put it. But yeah,
I think so. I mean, that was the whole idea behind it, wasn't it? Because we had chatted beforehand when we were coming up with a bit of a framework for the day, and I think we realised that one of the better ways that everybody kind of learns when they come to these events is by getting them chatting and getting them involved with doing a task. And so it was a bit of a mixture of, we're going to present some information to you and have a bit of a chat, try and get some discussion going amongst the kind of whole room, which I think was the hardest part. And then otherwise getting people into smaller groups and then doing particular exercises. So those exercises that we did, and to make them tangible, were around things that members, we think, are involved with quite regularly, being members at a district council. So one was around what happens when they want to call an application to planning committee. So we call them member referrals. Members here can either do that early doors when an application first comes in, or they can wait until they receive a report from a planning officer, particularly in a scenario where the officer recommendation is contrary to something we've received either from lots of objectors or from the town and parish council that is relevant to that area. It was
writing in support, not just objectors, but don't get into the technicality of it.
Yeah.
Contrary decision.
I did say contrary decisions. Come on now.
Oh, there you
go. So we tasked them with looking at a development scheme. I think it was a mixed-use development that we gave them. It's sparse with the details because that wasn't really the important part of it. It was just a task where, when push comes to shove, you've been given some information. If you wanted to allow delegation to officers so they didn't have to go to planning committee, what would you be looking out for? What would make you satisfied in that scenario? Trying to get members to think about concentrating on the planning considerations and not necessarily the people that are shouting at them loudest, where some of those considerations might not necessarily be material to the planning decision. Or alternatively, if they did want to take it to planning committee, how they go about doing that. We've got a requirement here at Wealden. I know different authorities work in different ways, that members have to provide us with relevant material planning considerations. So just for anybody that's not sure or interested, that's not just stating a material planning consideration. That would be too low a bar, I think. It's about then establishing why that's relevant to then take it to planning committee, i.e., some planning balance is kind of open to debate, and there's potentially a contrary view that holds some weight, and that needs to be settled more publicly and debated more publicly. How members go about doing that. So that was the first task. Then we did, like you mentioned, a bit about actually making a decision in a planning committee scenario. So gave members a bit more detail then. The premise of that was that you'd already, you're in committee now. You've already been discussing this application for kind of half an hour.
Half an hour, wasn't it?
Yeah, you've got to kind of make a decision one way or the other. Again, sparse on the detail, because it was up to them to decide, okay, what would I do in a scenario where I felt like I'd heard enough and it was okay, comfortable approving it, but equally in a scenario where members wanted to overturn an officer recommendation for refusal, for approval, so that the application would be refused instead. How would they go about doing that? Why would they do that? What would make an application or a report deficient from their point of view in order to do that? I think most members and groups focused around those two scenarios. Although there's always the option for them to defer an application to, which I think one group maybe touched on. Yeah, I think maybe I heard some feedback in the room about that. Anyway, that's what the task was about. So I think that was quite interesting and well received by members to go through.
It's stuff they knew in detail and had seen in considerable detail, because the scenario is not unusual, but just the way it was unpacked and the approaches, I think, was different, and deliberately so. And it wasn't confrontational or aggressive. It was all about how you stay grounded whilst trying to push a particular point.
Yeah.
And I think it worked well. I think it was a good decision. There was some quite colourful commentary on some of the tables, which is good.
Yeah.
We should say, actually, we had facilitators on the table, didn't we? We had
So we had
on the tables.
Yeah, about 10 of us went down, so there was planners on each table that were helping the conversation move along or helping members to understand some of the bits that they might misunderstand or struggle with sometimes. So I think that really helped, having people on the table that are in the know, so that it could help the conversation move forward. So that was good. And then very lastly, we did a little task around members trying to create a message to, say, residents in their local area about a particular type of decision, and each table had a different scenario. So it wasn't just something that's been approved that people didn't like. It was an approval, a refusal, an enforcement related matter, something related to particular types of development. So one was around a new pitch for a traveller family. And then I can't remember what the fifth one was, but anyway, there was a variety.
Greenfield development on the edge of a settlement.
Yeah,
was one of them, wasn't it? So this was really quite interesting, I think.
I found it interesting for a different reason, because we were floating around, weren't we, to different tables. Yeah. I remember going to a table that Toby and our team was sitting at, and members basically just being like, yeah, we're not bothered about this. You know, it was, do you have difficulty conveying these types of messages? They were like, no, we are really comfortable telling people that's how things work.
Except maybe we're getting into too much detail here, and this is dangerous territory. I know that table and the members that are on it, and I'm not sure it's necessarily true. So I think
Toby and I did try to push in that respect as well. It's like, okay, fine, because I think a lot of it was like, we were kind of just being jovial because we were in the kind of like, in the spirit of, the session that we were in and trying to keep it lighthearted. But I think there was a realization that it isn't just, oh, like that happened and I'm just telling you that it happened and like being matter of fact about it. It was, I suppose, there was acknowledgement about kind of like the empathy and explaining what's been done. But equally, I think going back to what was said originally when they said that they kind of just had it done and they're comfortable telling people, I think it was because they know sometimes that there's merit in or an understanding that sometimes, like you said, that there are always unhappy parties, and it's not necessarily trying to convince people that what was done was the right thing, but nonetheless saying it did happen and the things that you raised had been taken into account, and just being open and transparent about that. And maybe you might not change someone's mind about it, but it was about giving members the tools so that they are confident to do that. And that's the fact. I went to another table then where some of the members weren't confident about that, and actually did really see it as a, I'm a relatively new member. One of the reasons I got voted in was because of concerns with how things have been done in the past in relation to new development in their area. And they found it a real struggle to then be like, well, we carry on doing things that I have championed as not being particularly great things in the past, and they struggle with that. But I think it was really good to have a similar conversation, which was about, acknowledging those things, but understanding now that they do a bit more about the planning process and having, like I said, the tools available to them to have those conversations a bit more, will take ownership of them and be confident to have those conversations.
And more than that, knowing and hearing that lots of other members who are all in the same room are in the same position, and that was quite good, because there are members with varying experience. Some have been on the council for a very, very long time, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt and all the rest of it, and others, as you say, Sam, are newer. So it's good. There was actually a sort of final point on this. It was an interesting suggestion, and it isn't new. It's one that we've heard, and it's one that we've done, but not extensively. And that was the role of officers after the event, and a role for officers in going out and explaining decisions where it's particularly controversial or it's really kind of split a community. I've done it a couple of times of late. And actually, there's a story. I went to a particular, well, say settlement. I won't identify which one, to explain a decision which had been refused and appealed, and then we had actually decoupled from the appeal process following legal advice and following an extensive procurement process where we couldn't stand up a defence. There were no consultants that would defend the reasons for refusal that were given by the then planning committee. And it was really controversial, and local people felt they were upset, they were angry, they felt really quite let down. And I went to a meeting, explained. When I was leaving, a person, I won't identify the sex, came up to me, really red-faced, and I thought, uh-oh, this is not going to be good. And the person said, I'm furious with what you've done, but thank you for coming out and explaining. And sort of shook my hand and pumped it up and down really quite forcefully. And I said, I'd take that, I think. But that's the point, isn't it? If you can go and explain what we've done, it might not be the decision that people have pushed for, but if you can demonstrate that we've taken all the points into account and properly weighed them, but other points have been given more weight for whatever reason. It might be case law, it might be a policy, it might be whatever.
Yeah.
And I think people will appreciate and understand that explanation.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Well, that was good, I think. And we'll see. And I think it is the start of the more training. We will do, I said we didn't do the kind of topic-based training as a kind of conscious decision. I think we will do that. There's some stuff that's happening, different stuff. B&G's moved on. There's quite a lot of enforcement updates that we need to give our members and so on and so forth. So there will be a time and place for that, but it just wasn't this particular junction. Yeah. All right. So a couple more things. Next week, I'm not quite sure how this has happened actually, but it has happened. I've been invited to speak at the Planning Inspectorate's annual professional competence event. So that's their training, basically. None
of us know how it happened either.
Yeah. I think this is sort of he'll do, he'll probably say yes. But it's in Sheffield, and it's across 2 days, and inspectors, so this is all planning inspectors in the country, so annual training, they'll get together by the Planning Inspectorate. And actually their agenda looks varied and involved, and it's all sorts of things from heritage impact. There's quite a lot on the Mead case, which is about sequential test and flooding, which I think we've spoken about on the podcast before, right through to kind of dealing with Crown land and common and open land. I did see there was a workshop on that, so I will probably put my head into that one because that crops up quite a lot. Not the Crown land bit here, but common land and open land is something that we often have to deal with and don't necessarily have the kind of skills at our fingertips. So I will nose in on that one. But the bit that I'm speaking at is life at a local planning authority in 2025, and that is a few months into the new NPPF and the requirements within that document, particularly the growth agenda, which is in that document, 1.5 million homes in this parliamentary sitting, how we're dealing with that, both through development management, but also in regard to local plan production. But more than that, it's the impact on people and on resources and all that sort of stuff. So we've already mentioned health and well-being and the kind of effects of kind of relentless pressure, numbers of applications and kind of the requirement to do even more. We've touched on kind of health impact assessments. That's relatively new, and there's the requirements in terms of application process and policy formulation is ever growing, isn't it? So some stuff around that, then particularly what recommendations we can make on the planning inspectorate process. So that sort of coalface view, and I won't go into all detail of what I'm going to say. I'll probably update after next week. But there is some stuff which we sort of bite the inside of our cheek and sort of it doesn't make any sense, and procedural stuff, or when perhaps amendments are allowed by a sitting inspector. We understand the process they go through, but it literally makes no sense, and we can't explain it, or we struggle to explain it to our residents. So some stuff around that. I don't know whether that will land. They probably won't let me out of the room if I'm too grumpy about it. But I'm the first head of planning in the country, I believe, to go and speak at such an event. So,
oh wow,
yeah, I think
didn't realise that.
It is a bit of a privilege to go.
In which case, how did this happen?
Wow. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. Now, there's one further. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll sort of update more after the event. There was one further thing that I didn't mention on the intro. I know we've been going for a little while, but I think it would be remiss of us not to mention the West of Uckfield planning application. So we'll leave a link below. Yeah. So this is, it's out there, not that it was ever a secret, but this is the Owlsbury Farm, known as Owlsbury Farm development. Yeah. So it's land west of Uckfield at Owlsbury and wrapping around Horsted Green up to Little Horsted. So we have received the biggest planning application that we've ever had at Wealden. A kind of mixed use scheme of up to 1,700 homes with 35% affordable housing on site, a 50-unit residential care facility, and then a series of other mixed uses, including retail, commercial, other community uses, 2 form-entry primary school with some early years provision. There's then a multi-use sports hub and leisure facility. There's some community allotments included. There's a new SANG, suitable alternative natural green space. Children's play areas, open space, landscaping. There's 2 access points onto the main road. Load of other footpathy, connection-y type stuff. It's big. It is big. I don't think we can
can't summarise or explain it in any other way, I don't think, don't you?
No, quite. Now, development in this area was mentioned in the Regulation 18 plan. It was one of the purple blobs, or kind of areas that were washed over. Yeah,
the main thing was that it was shown as an area that wasn't allocated, but was flagged for consideration, and we genuinely wanted people's feedback. I mean, that is still a process that's being gone through, the adoption of a new local plan, and so things that have been said about it are still pertinent. But this is kind of moving on from that now, because we've
received
we've got the planning application in advance of that, so we'll have to consider it having regard to all the things that we know that we're meant to. And I suppose update in due course. I suppose maybe it might be something we mentioned again.
Yeah, I think so, because it's so large, isn't it? And I'll say this next bit. I'll start it so I finish. So I'm going to. We weren't expecting this planning application, but I mean some we are. There are pre-application discussions, and we kind of know what's coming, and we will do sort of early warning stuff to local members, certain parish and town councils, dependent upon the scale of it. But here, although there were discussions about the possibility of a policy allocation in the emerging local plan, there's been no pre-application discussions with ourselves running the development management team. I think that's odd and surprising, but every day's a school day, right?
Well, is that the right way? Is that the right phrase for this circumstance?
Well, you could say all sorts of other things, but we'll be getting into trouble if we do. Your point is spot on, which is that it's a lawfully and legitimately made planning application. It's with us. We've got to deal with it. I think we will have to go out. I'll say have to go out. We will go out to the communities involved. It crosses 4 wards. It's that big. So there'll be some discussion and some listening and some understanding. Maybe there's comments in support. I suspect that there are comments of concern, and we'll need to hear those, understand those as part of the detailed assessment. So that is application WD 2025-0922. and it's MEA, and that suffix is that it's a major application that's accompanied by an environmental impact assessment. But we'll include a link below so that those that want to go and interrogate that can do so. Final plug, there is a dedicated series of pages on the Let's Talk Hub. So regular listeners will know that there are certain pages where we dedicate specific consultation, we extract certain documents, and we put them on the hub. This is one of those. And one of the other things we're going to try and do, and it'll be another first, is we're going to pivot on some of our social media stuff. So we do quite a bit on the X channel, as regular listeners will know. But this scale of development, we are going to try and broaden our reach on social media. Do something on Instagram, dare I say it, TikTok. Yeah. Not just for the sake of it, but there is so much going on in this application that it would be important to at least trying to
engage a broader range of people, right?
That's it, exactly. You know, there's quite a bit of sport and open space provision within this application. Okay, it comes with a cost, I suppose, is the way of potentially putting it, in terms of development in this location and the scale of it. But some people might want to comment in support or otherwise of that particular component. So yeah, using social media ever so slightly differently in order to reach different people. That's the idea, but whether that will land or not, we'll see.
Cool.
All right.
Well, that's us then, I think, for today.
It is, yeah.
Brilliant. All right.
We'll try not to leave the gaps so long.
Yeah. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks all. Cheers. Bye.